That's my daddy. The little girl's voice cut through the noise like a blade. 7 years old, alone. Dirt on her face, tears in her eyes, and a crumpled photograph pressed against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her alive. She walked straight past every man in that bar, past the truckers, past the drifters, past the ones who looked like they could help, and stopped in front of the one man who looked like he couldn't be saved. Then she reached up and touched his arm. And the whole bar went silent. If this story already has your heart beating faster, you are exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, and follow every word of this story and all the way to the end, because what happens next will stay with you. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The kind of silence that fell over Hank's desert stop that Thursday evening was not the comfortable kind. It was not the silence of a slow night or a jukebox between songs. It was the silence that happens when something walks through a door that doesn't belong. Something so out of place, so wrong in every way, that the human brain just stops for a second and forgets to tell the mouth to keep moving. One moment the bar was exactly what it had always been. Bottles clinking, the low grumble of truck engines idling in the parking lot outside. A couple of men arguing about a football game that had ended 3 weeks ago. Hank himself, 62 years old, and shaped like a man who had never once turned down a meal, wiping down the same patch of bar counter he had been wiping for 20 years. A jukebox playing something slow and aching in the corner, some old Merle Haggard song about running from yourself. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the particular sadness that lives inside bars at the edge of nowhere. And then the door opened, and she walked in. 7 years old, maybe 8, but small for it. Her sneakers were the kind with Velcro straps because she hadn't learned to tie laces yet, and one of them was half undone, the strap dragging along the floor. Her jeans were torn at the knee, not the fashionable kind of torn, but the kind that happens when a child falls hard on gravel and keeps walking anyway. Her shirt was a faded yellow with a cartoon sun on the front, and it was 2 sizes too big, like it had been meant for someone else. Her hair was dark and tangled, pulled into a ponytail that was falling apart. And her face was the part that made every single person in that bar go quiet. Streaks of dried tears cutting through a layer of road dust, eyes red-rimmed and swollen. A bottom lip that was trembling just slightly, like she was fighting with everything she had not to cry again. And in her hands, pressed against her chest with both arms like she was protecting something precious, a photograph. Creased and crumpled and soft at the edges from being handled too many times. She stood in the doorway for just a moment, blinking against the light, and then she started walking. Not wandering, not lost looking. Walking with direction, like she knew exactly where she was going, even if nobody else could imagine why. Hank set down his rag. "Hey now, sweetheart." She didn't look at him. A trucker named Davis, who had been sitting at the near end of the bar, nursing his 3rd beer, leaned forward on his stool. "Hey, little one, you okay? You need me to call somebody?" She didn't look at him either. She moved through the bar the way a sleepwalker moves, eyes scanning, searching, passing over faces the way you pass over words in a book when you're looking for a specific name. And then her eyes stopped, at the far end of the bar, at the man who hadn't moved since anyone could remember. Ethan Harlan had been sitting at that same stool since 4 in the afternoon, and it was now pushing 9. He hadn't talked to anyone, hadn't looked at anyone. He had a glass of whiskey in front of him, not his first, not his last, and he had been staring at the surface of it the way a man stares when he's not actually looking at anything in front of him at all, but something very far away and a very long time ago. He was somewhere around 45, though he looked older in the way that men look older when life has been taking pieces of them for years and leaving nothing back. His leather vest was worn to softness, the kind of soft that only comes from a decade or more of highway miles. Patches on it, a skull, a flag, the words Iron Vow, MC, in arched letters across the back. His arms were bare below the vest, and those arms were covered in ink. Tattoos layered on top of tattoos, the accumulation of 25 years of decisions. Names, dates, a compass, barbed wire. And there on his right forearm, running from the inside of his wrist up toward his elbow, an eagle, wings spread wide, head turned to one side. Rendered in black and gray with the kind of precision that meant someone had spent real time and real care making it permanent. The little girl walked straight to him, She stopped just behind his right shoulder, close enough to touch. And then she reached out her small hand, the one that wasn't holding the photograph, and she pressed her fingertips against the eagle on his arm. Ethan didn't move right away. He felt the touch, warm light, the unmistakable, delicate pressure of a child's hand, and he turned his head slowly, the way a man turns when he thinks he must be wrong about what he's feeling. He looked down at her hand on his arm. He looked up at her face. She was looking at the eagle like she recognized it, like she had seen it before in a dream, or a story, or a life before this one. Then she said it. "That's my daddy." Quiet, just above a whisper. But in that bar, in that silence that had already fallen, it landed like something thrown from a great height. Ethan stared at her. He said nothing. She looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time, and whatever she saw in his face made her chin start to tremble again. She pulled the photograph from her chest with both hands and held it out toward him. Held it up the way a child holds up something at school to show the teacher. Both arms extended, completely trusting, completely desperate. "He had the same eagle," she said, "right there." She pointed at his arm, then at the photograph. "Same spot." Ethan looked down at the photograph. The world around him contracted to the size of that image. A soldier in desert camouflage, standing in front of a transport vehicle, squinting against bright sun, one arm raised to give a thumbs up at the camera, grinning the grin of a man who hasn't learned yet that some things don't end the way you expect. Young, too young looking back at it now, and there visible below his rolled-up sleeve on the inside of his right forearm, the unmistakable spread of an eagle's wings. The whiskey glass in Ethan's hand made a sound against the bar when he set it down. He wasn't aware he'd made it. He wasn't aware of much of anything for a moment except the photograph and the little girl holding it and the roaring inside his head that felt like standing next to a highway as a semi-truck blows past at full speed. "Where did you get this?" His voice came out rougher than he meant it to. She didn't flinch. She kept holding the photograph out toward him. "My mama gave it to me. Before—" She stopped, swallowed, tried again. "Before she went to sleep and didn't wake up." Somewhere behind them, someone put down a glass, slowly. "When did your mama—" Hank started from behind the bar and then stopped himself, because some questions a 62-year-old man doesn't know how to finish. The little girl kept her eyes on Ethan. "3 days ago," she said. "She got real sick. And she told me, before she closed her eyes, she said to find the man with the eagle. She said the man with the eagle will come for you." She paused. Her bottom lip was shaking harder now. "Been looking." The bard didn't breathe. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the photograph again. Then he looked at the eagle on his own arm, the eagle he'd gotten 22 years ago in a tattoo parlor in Killeen, Texas, the night before deployment, sitting next to a man named Jake Mercer, who was getting the exact same one because Jake had said, "Brothers mark themselves the same way, so we can always find each other no matter what." And Ethan had laughed and called him sentimental and got the tattoo anyway because that was the kind of man Jake was, the kind you followed into things you didn't fully believe in yet, because his belief was enough for both of you. Jake Mercer, who had died in a dust-choked valley outside Fallujah 17 years ago, who had grabbed Ethan's arm in the last minutes when everything was smoke and noise and wrong, and said with a seriousness that Ethan had never been able to shake loose from his memory, "My little girl, Lily, you find her if I don't make it back. You hear me? You find her. Promise me." And Ethan had said, "Stop talking like that." And Jake had said, "Promise me, Harlan." And Ethan, because there had been no other choice in that moment, because Jake's eyes had been asking something that went beyond words, had said, "I promise." And then the convoy had moved, and Jake hadn't come home. And Ethan had carried that promise for 17 years like a stone in his chest, sometimes barely feeling it, sometimes feeling it so heavy he couldn't breathe. And he had told himself over the years in the dark hours that he had tried, that he had looked, that Jake's wife Sarah had moved after the funeral, had taken the baby, and disappeared into a life Ethan couldn't find, that a promise made in the fire of battle to a dying man in a country far from home could eventually be forgiven, even if it was never quite kept. He had told himself that. He hadn't always believed it. He looked at the little girl now. Dark hair, dark eyes like her father's. That same particular way of holding her chin slightly tilted up like she was bracing for impact. Jake had stood the same way. In every barracks, in every briefing, in every moment before something hard and necessary chin up. Like the world was coming and he was meeting it halfway. "What's your name?" Ethan said. His voice was almost steady. She said, "Lily." The stone in Ethan's chest cracked down the middle. He breathed, just breathed for a second. Let it move through him. Then he said carefully, "Lily what?" "Lily Ann Mercer," she said. "After my grandma on my daddy's side, Shawda. Mama said it was important to keep a name." Hank made a sound behind the bar, low, involuntary. The sound a person makes when something hits them that they weren't prepared for. Ethan got up from the bar stool. He did it slowly, the way men move when they've been sitting still for a long time, and the body needs a moment to remember what it's for. He was tall when he stood taller than he looked. Sitting down, and Lily took one small step backward, not from fear exactly, but from the automatic adjustment of someone recalibrating the space between herself and a large person. He knelt down, right there on the bar floor in front of everyone, one knee on the old wood, bringing himself to her level, bringing his eyes to where she could see them straight on without having to crane her neck. Her eyes were dry now. She had stopped the tremble. She was looking at him the same way she had been looking at the eagle, like she was trying to read something written in a language she was still learning. "Your daddy," Ethan said slowly and carefully. "His name was Jake." She nodded. "Jake Mercer. And he was a soldier." "He was a hero," she said. No hesitation. "Mama told me." She was right, Ethan said. The words cost him something. He paid them anyway. He was the best man I ever knew. Lily looked at him for a long moment. Something was happening behind her eyes. Something complicated and careful and older than 7 years should have to be. "Did you know him?" "I did." "For how long?" "Long time, years. We served together." Her brow furrowed slightly. "Then how come you never came?" The bar had been quiet before. Now it was something beyond quiet. It was the particular stillness of a room full of people who are trying not to exist because the thing happening in front of them is too private and too real to interrupt with any sound at all. Ethan felt the question go into him like something sharp, precise. The way a child's honesty is always more precise than an adult's anger. "I tried to find your mama," he said, "after your daddy, after he was gone. I tried to find where she went. I lost track." Lily considered this. She did not immediately accept it or reject it. She held it the way a child holds an answer they're not sure about but are willing to think on. "She moved a lot," she said finally. "She said it was because she needed a fresh start, but I think she was shot and didn't want people to see." "Yeah," Ethan said. "Yeah, I think that's probably at least true." "She talked about you." That landed somewhere Ethan wasn't expecting. She did, not by name. She said Daddy had a brother. Not a real brother, but a brother like some men get, she said, when they go through something together that nobody else can understand. Lily tilted her head slightly. She said if anything ever happened to her, if I couldn't find family, she said the man with the eagle would find me. Or I could find him. She looked at the photograph, then at his arm. She drew me a picture of it, so I'd know. Ethan's jaw tightened. He pressed his back teeth together and held on for a moment. "She drew you a picture?" "Mm-hmm. On a piece of notebook paper. I kept it in my shoe so it wouldn't get lost." She reached down and worked off her sneaker, the one with the half-undone strap, and extracted a folded piece of paper from inside it, crumpled and slightly damp, but intact. She unfolded it and held it out. It was a child's drawing, done by an adult, simple lines recognizable. An eagle, wings spread, same placement, same shape. Sarah Mercer had drawn an eagle from memory after 17 years, and her daughter had carried it 3 days through the Nevada desert in her shoe. Ethan took the drawing from Lily's hand. He held it for a moment. He was aware of his hands, the size of them, the roughness of them, the tattoos on them, and how carefully he was holding the small, fragile piece of paper like it was the most important document he'd ever been handed, which he thought it might be. "How did you get here?" he said. "How'd you find this place?" "I walked from the motel," she said. "Mama died at the motel, room 11. The lady at the desk, she was nice. She gave me crackers and called someone. But I heard her on the phone saying they were going to take me somewhere, And I didn't want to go somewhere because Mama said, find the eagle, man, not go somewhere with strangers. A pause. I know you're a stranger too, but you have the eagle, so it's different. How far is the motel? I don't know. A while, my feet hurt. Davis, the trucker, at the near end of the bar made a sound in the back of his throat. A big man, not a sentimental one. He turned back to his beer and stared at it hard like it had said something offensive to him. Ethan looked at Lily's feet, the undone Velcro strap, the scuff marks on the toes of her sneakers. Are you hungry? He said. She looked at him, looked away, looked back. Yeah, Hank. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. You got anything in the back sandwich burger? Anything. Got a burger going right now, Hank said immediately. His voice was slightly rough around the edges. Got fries too. Be about 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Ethan looked at Lily. Can you sit with me for 6 minutes while we figure out what comes next? She studied him for a moment with those Jake Mercer eyes. Calculating. Weighing. Then she climbed up onto the bar stool next to his with the automatic competence of a child who has been taking care of herself for a little longer than she should have had to. Okay, she said. 6 minutes. Ethan sat back on his own stool. He picked up his whiskey glass. He thought about putting it to his lips. He set it back down. Davis, without looking at anyone, flagged Hank for a glass of water and slid it down the bar toward the girl. She caught it with both hands, said thank you without being prompted. Drank half of it in one go. The jukebox started up again, some other old song about long roads. Ethan Harlan sat in the hum of it and thought about a night 17 years ago, under stars that looked different in that desert next to a man who made him promise something. And for the first time in a very long time, he did not feel the weight of a promise broken. He felt the weight of something beginning, something he had not chosen and could not refuse and did not in this moment want to. 6 minutes. He could do 6 minutes. And then he was going to have to figure out how to do the rest of his life. The burger came out in 5 minutes, not 6, because Hank had turned up the heat on the grill and stood over it the entire time like a man with something to prove. He set it in front of Lily without a word, with a pile of fries on the side and a bottle of ketchup. And then he went back to his side of the bar and found something very important to look at on the shelf behind him. Lily ate the way children eat when they haven't eaten in a while, not fast but steadily, with a kind of focused gratitude that had nothing to do with manners and everything to do with need. She held the burger with both hands and took deliberate bites and did not look up for the first 2 minutes, and nobody in the bar said a word while she did it because there are certain moments that even the roughest men understand are sacred without being told. Ethan watched her from the corner of his eye. He didn't stare. He looked the way you look at something you're trying to understand before it disappears. She had Jake's hands. He hadn't noticed that until now. The same square shape to the fingernails. The same slight gap between the index and middle finger. It was such a small thing. Such a specific, irrelevant, devastating thing. He pressed his back teeth together and breathed through it. You got anyone? He said after a while. Family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, anybody. Lily set the burger down and thought about it with the seriousness of someone consulting a mental inventory. Grandma Patrice, on my mama's side. But Mama said she moved to Florida and they stopped talking before I was born. And Daddy's mama, she hesitated. Daddy's mama died when I was little. Mama told me she was a good woman. She was, Ethan said. Margaret Mercer, she made the best biscuits I ever tasted in my life. Lily looked at him sideways. You knew her too. Spent a Thanksgiving at their house in 2002. Your daddy could not cook a thing, but your grandma made up for it. Something shifted in Lily's face, something small and significant. She picked up a fry and pointed it at him, the way kids do when they're making a point. Tell me something else about him, that nobody else knows. It was not a request. It was a test, and they both understood that. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the bar. He was afraid of spiders, he said. Big, tough, army man, decorated twice, scared out of his mind by anything with 8 legs. We were in the barracks once, and a wolf spider came out from under his bunk, and I mean a big one, and Jake Mercer, who had run into gunfire without blinking, jumped up on his bed and pointed at it and told me to deal with it because it was my turn. Lily stared at him. Then she let out a laugh. A real one. Short and bright and completely unguarded the way children laugh when something genuinely surprises them. It lasted just a second and then it was gone, and the absence of it hurt in a way that Ethan didn't expect. Mama said the same thing, Lily said quietly. She said he screamed at a spider once and woke her up at 2 in the morning. She laughed every time she told it. She looked down at her plate. She told it a lot. The bar was quiet again, not the held breath quiet of before, but something gentler, something that was making room. Davis pushed his empty beer bottle to the edge of the bar and cleared his throat. "I'm going to step outside," he announced to no one in particular, and got up and kept his face turned away as he walked to the door, and the back of his neck was red in the way necks get when a man is working very hard to feel nothing. The door swung closed behind him. Ethan looked at Lily. "The motel you came from, do you remember the name of it?" "The Sunrise," she said. "Had a big sign. The S was broken, so it just said Unrise." The Sunrise Motel. Ethan knew it, 15 minutes up the highway. One of those places with a vending machine that ate your quarters and a swimming pool that had been empty for 6 years. "Okay, and the woman at the desk, she was going to call someone, you heard her on the phone. Did she say who she was calling?" Lily's expression shifted. The openness contracted slightly. "Social services. That's what she said. She said, I need to report an unattended minor. Like I was a lost dog." A pause. "I know what social services is. Mama talked about it. She said she was afraid of it. She said they take kids away and you don't always get to come back." "Your mama was right to explain it to you," Ethan said carefully. "But it's not always like that." "I don't want to go," Lily said. Flat, certain, no tears, no drama. Just the simple declaration of someone who has already decided. "Mama said to find the Eagle Man. I found him. That's the plan." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "Lily, that's the plan," she said again. He looked at her. She looked back at him. Jake had had the same look, the look that said, "I've made my decision and you can try to change it, but we both know how this ends." Ethan had never won an argument with Jake Mercer. He had a feeling the record was about to stay intact across a generation. "All right," he said. "All right, but we have to do this right. You understand there are people looking for you. The woman at the motel probably already made that call, which means..." His phone buzzed on the bar. He looked at an unknown number, Nevada area code. He picked it up. "Yeah. Is this Ethan Harlan?" A woman's voice. Professional. Controlled. The voice of someone trained to stay calm inside other people's crises. His eyes went to Lily. She was watching him. He kept his face neutral. "Who's asking?" "My name is Carol Reyes. I'm a family services coordinator with Clark County. We received a call about a missing child approximately 40 minutes ago. A girl 7 years old found alone at the Sunrise Motel on Route 160. The front desk attendant said she left the premises on foot before our team could arrive. I understand she may have made contact with someone at a bar in the area." The muscles in Ethan's jaw tightened. "How'd you get this number?" "The attendant at the bar, a Mr. Hank Dwyer, provided it when contacted. He indicated you were the individual who had made contact with the child." Ethan looked at Hank. Hank had his back to him, but the set of his shoulders said everything. He'd done what he thought was right. Ethan couldn't even be angry at him for it. He exhaled. "She's here. She's safe. She's eating." On the other end, he heard Carol Reyes type something. Fast. "Good. That's good. Sir, I need you to keep her there until our team arrives." "She's not going into the system," Ethan said. A brief pause. "Sir, I understand this may feel..." "She has someone," he said. "She has me." Another pause longer. "And your relationship to the child is..." "Her father was my brother," Ethan said. "Not by blood, by the thing that makes blood look like a rough draft." The bar was very still. Carol Reyes said carefully, "That's not a legal relationship recognized by the state." "Not yet," Ethan said, "but it will be. You get me the paperwork, you tell me what I need to do, and you give me time to do it right. But she doesn't go with strangers tonight. She's been through enough." There was a long pause. He could hear Carol Reyes breathing. He could hear behind her breath the particular sound of someone who has been doing this job long enough to know the difference between a man running from responsibility and a man running toward it. "I need to verify who you are." she said finally. Verify whatever you want. I'll be here. He put the phone face down on the bar. Lily was watching him with those dark eyes. Was that them? She said. Yeah. Are they coming? Probably. She absorbed this. Are you going to let them take me? He looked at her for a long moment. A man looking at a promise that has a face now, that has his best friend's hands and his best friend's chin, and the weight of every year he spent not keeping his words staring back at him through the eyes of a 7-year-old. No, he said, I'm not. Something in her face, something that had been very tightly held since she walked through that door, let go just slightly, not all the way. Kids like Lily, kids who have been surviving on their own for longer than they should, don't let go all at once. It comes in pieces over time if someone is patient enough to wait. But just slightly, just enough that she picked up the burger again and took another bite and chewed it slowly, like she had time now. Like 6 minutes could turn into something longer. Hank came back from the far end of the bar and stopped in front of Ethan. His voice was low. I had to call them. You understand, a child alone. I know, Ethan said. You did right. Hank looked at Lily. She need anything else, got pie in the back. Apple. You want pie? Ethan asked her. Lily considered this with appropriate gravity. Yes, please, she said. Hank went for the pie. Davis came back in from outside. His face was composed again with the particular overcomposed look of a man who has recently had a feeling he wasn't prepared for. He sat back on his stool without looking at anyone. Then after a moment he said to the bar in general to nobody, Kid walked 3 miles in the dark by herself, 3 miles. Nobody answered him, but the words hung in the air the way true things do. Ethan picked up his phone and scrolled to a number. He sat with his thumb over it for a second, then pressed call and put it to his ear. It rang 4 times. He thought it was going to voicemail. Then the line opened. Harlan. The voice on the other end was rough and alert despite the hour. You alive? Yeah, Rex, I need you. Rex Dolan, 6'2", gray-bearded president of the Iron Vow MC, for the last 9 years, had known Ethan since before the tattoos, before the motorcycle, before the war had taken pieces out of both of them and sent them home to figure out what was left. His voice, even through a phone line, had the texture of someone who had been through enough that nothing surprised him anymore. Almost nothing. Talk to me, Rex said. Jake's daughter is sitting next to me in a bar in the desert, Ethan said. Her mother just died. She walked 3 miles alone in the dark with a photograph and a drawing in her shoe because her mother told her to find the man with the eagle. She found me. Silence on the other end. Jake Mercer's daughter, Rex said finally. Not a question, a confirmation. Like he needed to hear the words land in the real world. Lillianne Mercer, 7 years old, eating apple pie right now. Another silence, but a different kind. The kind where a man is rearranging things in his head very quickly and with great precision. Social services. They called. I told them she has someone. You told them she has you. Yeah. Rex breathed. Okay, I'm calling Decker. He's got that paralegal he knows in Henderson. And you're going to need a place tonight that isn't a bar parking lot. He paused. My sister's in Boulder City. She's got a spare room. She likes kids. She won't ask questions. Rex, don't thank me. Jake pulled me out of a ditch in Mosul that I would have died in. This is just, don't thank me. A beat. 2 hours. Keep her where she is. I'll have Decker call you. The line went dead. Ethan set the phone down. Lily was watching him, a fork full of apple pie held in midair. Who was that? Someone who knew your dad too, Ethan said. He's going to help us. Help us do what he thought about how to say it. He thought about what was honest and what was kind and where those two things met. Help us make sure you don't have to be alone anymore. She held the pie fork still for another second. Then she put it in her mouth. Then she said around the pie with the pragmatic directness of a child who has decided to trust someone and is moving forward accordingly. Okay, but I want to bring Daddy's photograph. Wherever we go. You'll bring it, he said. You'll always bring it. She nodded and went back to the pie. And in the bar, at the edge of nowhere with a jukebox playing an old song, and a man who had been running from a promise for 17 years sitting beside the reason that promise had ever mattered, the night shifted. Not toward easy. Nothing about what came next was going to be easy, and every person in that room probably understood that in their own way. But it shifted towards something. And for a 7-year-old girl who had walked 3 miles in the dark with a drawing in her shoe because her mother told her the Eagle Man would come, something was enough. Decker called 40 minutes later. Not 2 hours. Ethan had Rex to thank for that. When Rex Dolan told someone to move fast, they moved fast because the alternative was explaining to Rex why they hadn't. Decker's full name was Marcus Decker, and he had been Iron Vow's unofficial legal problem solver for 6 years, which meant he occupied the specific and necessary space between a lawyer and a man who understood that some situations didn't fit neatly into legal categories and needed someone willing to stand in the gap. His voice on the phone was clipped and focused. Okay, here's where we are. Social Services has an open case on the child Lily Mercer as of tonight. They're required to make physical contact within 24 hours. That's the clock. So we have 24 hours, Ethan said. Less. The coordinator, Carol Reyes, she's not unreasonable. I've dealt with her office before, but her hands aren't entirely free. What we need is a formal emergency guardianship petition filed before she's required to place Lily in temporary foster care. If we can get that petition in front of a judge first, it creates a legal hold that gives us room to move. How fast can we file? Henderson Family Court opens at 8 a.m. I can have the paperwork ready by 6 if I start now. But Ethan, they're going to want documentation. They're going to want proof of your relationship to the father, proof of service character references, the whole picture. And they're going to want to know why you, a single man with a motorcycle club affiliation, are the best session for this child over a licensed foster placement. Ethan looked at Lily. She had finished the pie and was now sitting with her elbows on the bar and her chin in both hands, watching the jukebox from across the room with the particular unfocused attention of a child who was exhausted but fighting it. Her eyes were at half-mast. Her body was starting to lose the rigid control she'd been holding since she walked in. Tell them she walked 3 miles in the dark with a photograph and a drawing because her dying mother told her to find the man with the eagle, Ethan said. Tell them I'm the eagle. A pause. That's not legal language. No, but it's true, and you're good at your job, Decker. Make it both. Another pause shorter. I'll call you at 5:30. Don't go anywhere you can't be reached. The line went dead. Hank was leaning on the bar nearby, not pretending anymore that he wasn't listening. When Ethan put the phone down, Hank said, "You need a place to stay tonight. Both of you." Rex has something lined up in Boulder City. Boulder City is 40 minutes, Hank said. She's about 30 seconds from falling asleep on my bar counter, and you look like you've been hit by something heavy. I got a back room. It's not fancy. There's a cot and a half-decent couch, and nobody's going to come knocking at 2 in the morning. He said it the way he said most things, flat, without sentiment, in a tone that made it sound like offering shelter to a biker and an orphaned child at 9 at night was a completely unremarkable thing to do. It's just a room, Harlan. Take it. Ethan looked at him for a moment. There were things he could have said. He said none of them. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Hank. Hank waved a hand like the gratitude was an inconvenience and went to unlock the back room. Ethan turned to Lily. Hey. She blinked, came back from wherever she'd been. Hey, we're going to stay here tonight. In the back, there's a cot. She absorbed this with the wary practicality of someone who had been sleeping in unfamiliar places long enough to have stopped having opinions about it. Okay. Then, will you be there in the same room? Yeah. Okay, she said again, and something in her shoulders dropped about an inch. She slid off the bar stool, stood for a moment on slightly unsteady feet. Then she reached out and picked up the photograph from where it had been sitting on the bar between them this entire time, and she held it against her chest again, both arms the same way she'd walked in, and she looked up at him. Can I bring my ketchup? It was such a perfectly, specifically 7-year-old thing to say that Ethan had to look away for a second. Leave the ketchup, he said. I'll get you more tomorrow. She considered this, found it acceptable, nodded, and followed him toward the back. The bar's remaining patrons watched them go. Nobody said anything. Davis picked up his beer and stared at the label for a long time, like there was something written on it he needed to decipher. The jukebox played on. The back room was small and smelled like cardboard and old coffee, and the cot had a wool blanket that had seen better decades but was clean. Lily climbed onto it without complaint, still holding the photograph. Ethan sat on the couch across from her and unlaced his boots and set them on the floor, and for a while neither of them said anything. Then Lily said from under the blanket, "She wasn't sick for very long." Ethan looked over. "Your mama, 3 weeks. She said it came fast. She said some things do." A pause, Shoaspan. "She wasn't scared, or she pretended she wasn't. I couldn't always tell." "She was brave," Ethan said. "Probably both scared and brave at the same time. That's usually how it works." Silence. Then, "Were you scared in the war every day?" "Was my daddy every day?" Ethan said. "The ones who say they weren't are lying." She thought about this. "He still went, though." "Yeah, he still went." "Because of the promise?" Ethan frowned slightly. "What promise?" "The promise to protect people. Mama said that's why soldiers go, because they make a promise to protect people who can't protect themselves." She shifted under the blanket. "She said that's why Daddy didn't come home, because he kept the promise all the way to the end." Ethan didn't answer right away. He sat with it. Sat with the way Sarah Mercer had taken the worst possible thing, a husband who died too young, too far from home, and had found the most generous possible frame for it and given it to her daughter like a gift. Not a lie, not a false comfort, just the truest, kindest version of a brutal thing. That woman, he thought, that remarkable, devastating woman. "Yeah," he said finally. "That's right. That's exactly right." Lily was quiet for a moment, then very softly, "Will you keep the promise too?" The question reached across the room and took hold of something at the center of him. "I already am," he said. He heard her exhale. Long and slow and complete, the way children exhale when they have been holding their breath for days and someone finally tells them they can stop. And within 3 minutes from the sound of her breathing, she was asleep. Ethan sat in the dark for a long time. He didn't sleep. He thought about Jake. He thought about the year after Jake died, the year he had spent trying to locate Sarah, calling numbers that had been disconnected, writing to an address that returned to sender, driving past a house in Jake's hometown that had a "for rent" sign in the window and curtains pulled on every window. He had tried. He believed he had tried. But he had also at a certain point let himself stop. And the difference between trying and not stopping, that was the distance he had been living with for 17 years. It felt smaller now in this room with a child sleeping 10 feet away who had walked 3 miles in the dark to find him. Not gone. Not forgiven exactly, but smaller. Something he could carry rather than something that carried him. His phone lit up at 11:42. A text from Rex's sisters: "Ready if you need to move. Decker's working. We're on it." And then 30 seconds later, a second text from a number he didn't recognize. He almost ignored it. He opened it. It read, "Mr. Harlan, this is Carol Reyes. I've been doing this job for 11 years. I know the difference. Don't make me regret this. Have her in front of a judge before noon tomorrow. See." He stared at that text for a full minute. Then he typed back, "Thank you, I will." He set the phone face down, leaned his head back against the couch, closed his eyes, didn't sleep, not really, but let himself rest in the way that men rest when they're on alert, half in and half out of the world, monitoring without moving. At some point in the early hours, Lily made a sound. Not a cry, more like a sharp breath, the kind that comes right before one. Ethan was on his feet before he was fully awake. He crossed the room in the dark and crouched next to the cot. She wasn't fully awake. Her face was scrunched, her hands gripping the photograph through the blanket. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey, you're okay. I'm right here." She didn't wake up, but something in her face smoothed out. Her hands loosened their grip slightly. She made a small sound, not a word, just a sound, and then her breathing went slow again. Ethan stayed crouched next to the cot for a while, just to make sure. Then he went back to the couch. The night moved on. At 5:20 a.m., his phone buzzed. "Decker. Papers are ready. Emergency guardianship petition, documentation of service relationship. Rex is signing as character witness, and I've got a statement from the bar owner, Dwyer, about last night's events. Judge Hannigan is hearing emergency matters at 9. She's fair, and she's seen worse. We have a shot. What do we need to do? You need to get cleaned up, get the girl cleaned up, and be in my office in Henderson by 7:30. And Ethan, a pause. You need to be ready for them to ask hard questions about your lifestyle, the club, your history. They're going to look at everything. I know, and you're okay with that. He looked across the room at the small shape under the wool blanket, at the photograph tucked against her visible, at the edge where the blanket had shifted, at the Velcro sneakers placed neatly side by side on the floor because she had taken them off before she slept, because Sarah Mercer had apparently raised a child with manners even in the middle of catastrophe. Ask me anything they want, Ethan said. I've got nothing to hide that matters more than her. Decker was quiet for a second. Okay, 7:30. He woke Lily at 6. She came awake fast the way kids do when they've been sleeping in unsafe places, eyes open, fully present, hand going immediately to the photograph. She looked at him, looked at the room, processed. We moving? We're moving, he said. You need to wash your face and I need to make a phone call. You okay for 5 minutes? She was already sitting up, reaching for her sneakers. I'm okay. He stepped out of the back room and into the bar, which was empty and dim, early morning pressing gray through the windows. Hank was already up. The man seemed to run on no sleep and black coffee, and he set a mug on the bar when he saw Ethan come in. How is she? Hank asked. Tough, Ethan said, like her father. Hank nodded slowly. You know what you're getting into. With all of it, the legal piece, the everything. Yeah, and you're going in anyway. It was never really a question, Ethan said. And the strange thing was that it was true, or it had become true sometime in the night while he sat in the dark and listened to a child breathe and thought about a man who had died, making sure other people got to go home. It had never been a question. He just hadn't known it until she touched his arm. Hank picked up his coffee and drank. Set it down. For what it's worth, and I know it ain't worth much from an old barkeep, you're doing the right thing. And Jake Mercer, wherever he is, I think he knows that. Ethan didn't trust himself to speak for a moment. He wrapped both hands around the coffee mug Hank had poured for him and breathed in the steam. Then he said, You gave a statement to the paralegal last night. Wrote it myself, Hank said. Told them exactly what I saw. A child who knew where she was going and a man who didn't walk away. Told them I've been running this bar 20 years and I've seen every kind of man come through that door. And some of them I trust with nothing, and some of them I trust with everything. I wrote down which kind you are. Ethan looked at him. Hank. Drink your coffee, Hank said. You'd have got a long day. The backroom door opened and Lily appeared. Her face was washed. Her hair was still tangled, but she'd made an effort and the ponytail was tighter, pulled back with the band she'd apparently had around her wrist the whole time. She had the photograph tucked into the waistband of her jeans visible at the hem of her shirt. She looked at both men. I'm ready, she said. And she was. That was the thing. She was 7 years old. She had lost her mother 3 days ago. She had slept on a cot in a storage room with a near stranger, and she stood in the doorway of that bar at 6 in the morning with her chin tilted up and her shoulders back, and her father's photograph pressed against her side, and she said, I'm ready. Ethan drank the last of the coffee. He set the mug on the bar. He walked to the door and held it open. Lily walked through it without hesitating, and just as they stepped out into the morning, Ethan's phone rang again. Not Decker, not Rex. An unknown number different from Carol Reyes's. He almost let it go. Something made him answer. The voice on the other end was male, older, with an official texture that Ethan recognized from years of dealing with people who wore authority like a uniform. Mr. Harlan, my name is Dennis Pryor. I'm calling from the Nevada Division of Family and Child Services Regional Office. I understand there's been some preliminary communication with one of our coordinators regarding the Mercer child. That's right, Ethan said. He stepped a few feet away from Lily, keeping her in his eye line. I want to be straightforward with you, Mr. Harlan. Carol Reyes does not have the authority to make informal arrangements on behalf of this office. Whatever she may have communicated to you last night, the division's position is that a child in this circumstance requires immediate placement in a licensed facility while legal matters are sorted. That process begins this morning. I'd encourage you to bring the child to our Henderson office by 9 a.m. Ethan felt something cold and clear move through him, the kind of cold that isn't fear, that's on the other side of fear where things get very simple and very focused. I have a court petition being filed at 9 a.m., he said, emergency guardianship, in front of Judge Hannigan. A pause on the other end, shorter than he would have expected. That process can take weeks to resolve, Mr. Harlan. In the meantime, Ethan said, she has someone, and she is not going anywhere until a judge tells me otherwise. That's not a threat. That's a fact. You want to talk to my attorney? His name is Marcus Decker. He's in Henderson. He'll be happy to hear from you. He ended the call. He stood for a moment in the early morning phone in hand, breathing steady. Then he turned around. Lily was watching him from 3 feet away. She had heard enough. Maybe all of it. Her expression was the careful, controlled expression of a child who has learned not to fall apart until she knows whether falling apart is something she can afford. That was them, she said. Yeah. They want to take me. They want to try, Ethan said. There's a difference, Widow. She looked at him for a long moment. Are you going to let them? He crouched down to her level. Right there outside Hank's bar in the early morning, with the desert going gold around them, and a day of hard things ahead, he looked her straight in the eyes, those dark Jake Mercer eyes that had been finding him since last night, finding him and not letting go. I made a promise, he said, a long time ago, to your father, and I was late keeping it. I'm not going to be late twice. Lily held his gaze, held it the way her father used to hold things with complete unwavering attention, the way people hold things when they're deciding whether to believe them or not, and the decision matters more than anything else in the world. Then she reached out and put her small hand over the eagle on his arm, the same way she had the night before, same placement, same deliberate touch. Okay, she said, let's go. Decker's office was on the second floor of a building that smelled like printer ink and bad coffee. And when Ethan and Lily walked through the door at 7:22, Decker was already on the phone, already in motion, already 3 steps ahead of the conversation he was having. He held up one finger at them, wait, and kept talking. Marcus Decker was not a large man. He was compact and precise in the way that certain people are precise, every word chosen. Every movement intentional, nothing wasted. He was 41, had served 2 years as a JAG officer before leaving the military with a particular understanding of how institutions move when they want something and how to put your body in the doorway when they shouldn't have it. He wore a collared shirt with the sleeves rolled up and reading glasses pushed back on his head like he'd forgotten they were there, which he had. He finished the call and looked at them. His eyes moved to Lily and stayed there for just a second, taking stock, not staring, and then moved back to Ethan. Dennis Pryor called you, he said. It wasn't a question. 45 minutes ago. He called me 12 minutes ago. Decker picked up a folder from his desk and held it out. Pryor is not Carol Reyes. He's a regional director who gets involved when a case has complications, and he considers you a complication. He's going to push Judge Hannigan to deny the emergency petition on the grounds that a single male with no prior childcare history and a motorcycle club affiliation does not constitute a suitable emergency placement. Can he do that? He can argue it. Whether she agrees is another thing. Hannigan has seen men like Pryor before, and she has also seen men like you before, and she is smart enough to know the difference between a file and a person. He paused. But I won't lie to you, this morning is not guaranteed. We're walking into a hearing with less than 12 hours of preparation against a regional director who has done this 1,000 times. What do we need? We need Lily to be composed because judges are human beings, and human beings respond to what they see. We need you to answer every question directly and without defensiveness, because the moment you push back emotionally, Pryor wins. And we need Rex Dolan in that room because a signed character statement is one thing, and a man willing to stand up in front of a judge is another. He looked at his watch. Rex is 40 minutes out. We have time to go through the questions I expect they'll ask. Lily had been standing slightly behind Ethan's left arm this entire time, listening with the attentiveness of a child who understands that the conversation happening over her head is about her and has therefore decided to learn everything she can from it. Now she said, "Will they ask me questions too?" Decker looked at her. "Possibly. The judge may want to speak with you briefly. She'll ask what you want. You can answer honestly." He said it without condescension, without the particular softening that adults sometimes apply to children that children always recognize and resent. Lily nodded. "I know what I want." "Good," Decker said. "That helps." He walked them through the questions for the next 40 minutes. He asked Ethan about his finances stable, the garage he co-owned in Reno, produced enough, and his criminal record. Two misdemeanors 15 years ago, both resolved, and his living situation, a house, not a trailer, with a spare bedroom that had been used for storage and could be cleared, in the nature of the Iron Vow MC, which Decker approached with the directness of a man who needed to understand something before a judge asked him to defend it. Ethan answered all of it straight. No hedging, no softening. The club was a brotherhood of veterans. Some of them had rough histories. None of them were what television made them look like. They showed up when people needed showing up for. At one point, Lily leaned over and said to Decker in a tone of complete seriousness, "They gave food to a homeless man outside the gas station last month. I saw it. Ethan told me." She looked at Ethan. "You did tell me. Last night." Ethan had in fact mentioned this. It was a small thing. It was also somehow in this moment the most important thing she could have offered. Decker wrote it down without comment, but the corner of his mouth moved slightly. Rex arrived at 8:15. He came through the door, filling it in the way Rex always filled any space he entered. Not aggressively, but completely the way a large, self-possessed man enters a room that he has decided to be responsible for. His gray beard was trimmed. He was wearing a collared shirt. He had left the vest at home. Ethan noticed that and felt something move through him that he couldn't name. Rex looked at Lily. Lily looked at Rex. Rex crouched down, which took some effort from a 6'2" man with bad knees, and he held out his hand. "You must be Lily," he said. "I'm Rex. I knew your dad." Lily shook his hand. "Was he good at his job?" Rex didn't blink. "The best I ever saw." She absorbed this, added it to the collection she was building. "Okay," she said. "Are you going to help us today?" "That's why I'm here," Rex said. He stood back up with a grunt and looked at Ethan over her head, and there was something in that look, something old and solid and unspoken that needed no translation. The family court building was 10 minutes away, and they arrived with 20 minutes to spare, which Decker used to move through the hallway with a phone pressed to his ear, while Rex walked beside Lillian and asked her in a perfectly natural tone whether she preferred dogs or cats. And Lily said dogs without hesitation, because cats, she explained, were too secretive, and Rex said that was the smartest thing he had heard all week. Ethan walked behind them and watched Rex make a 7-year-old girl laugh in the hallway of a family court building 20 minutes before a hearing that could determine the rest of her life. And he thought, this is why you make brothers. This is exactly why. Dennis Pryor was already inside when they entered the courtroom. He was a tall man with the particular bearing of someone who has spent decades being taken seriously, gray-suited, with a junior colleague beside him, carrying a file thick enough to have its own gravitational pull. He glanced at Ethan when they came in, at Rex, at Decker, and then at Lily, and his expression did not change, which Ethan found more troubling than if it had. Judge Elena Hannigan entered at 9:02. She was in her late 50s, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and the efficient, unhurried manner of someone who had long ago made peace with the fact that her job was impossible and had decided to do it as well as she possibly could anyway. She sat, arranged her papers, looked at both sides, and said, "We're here on an emergency guardianship petition regarding Lily Ann Mercer, age 7. Mr. Decker, this is your petition. You may begin." Decker was precise and clean. He laid out the facts in sequence: Jake Mercer's service and death, Ethan's promise, the documented military relationship between the two men, Sarah Mercer's death 3 days ago, Lily's deliberate journey to find Ethan, the photograph, the drawing, and the shoe. That detail, the drawing and the shoe, he let land without embellishment, and Ethan watched it land on the judge's face and stay there. Pryor's response was measured, and Ethan had to admit professionally constructed. He acknowledged the emotional weight of the circumstances. He expressed no hostility toward Ethan personally. And then he laid out point by methodical point why emotion was not a legal standard, why established protocols existed to protect children, and why a man with no child care experience, no verified stable home environment, and an affiliation with an outlaw motorcycle club was not, regardless of personal sentiment, an appropriate emergency placement for a traumatized 7-year-old. He used the word outlaw twice, deliberately. The second time, Lily made a small sound beside Ethan. Not a word, just a sharp breath through her nose. Ethan put his hand on the table between them, and she pressed 3 fingers against the back of it, and he did not move his hand. Judge Hannigan asked Pryor, "What is your proposed placement?" "We have a licensed foster family in Henderson. 2 adults, no other children currently in the home, fully vetted and approved by this division. And they are aware of the circumstances of this particular child. They're aware she's a recent orphan. They're prepared for a transitional placement." "Transitional," the judge said, not questioning it, just repeating it, letting it sit in the room. "Yes, Your Honor, while longer-term arrangements are assessed." Hannigan made a note. Then she looked at Ethan. "Mr. Harlan, you served with this child's father." "Yes, Your Honor. 3 years, 2 deployments. And he asked you specifically to care for his daughter in the event of his death." "He did." "And you were unable to locate the family after his death." "I tried for approximately 14 months. His wife relocated. I lost the trail." He said it plainly, without excuse, but without self-flagellation either. "I should have tried longer. I didn't. That's a fact I've carried." Hannigan studied him. "You have a spare bedroom." "I do. It's currently being used for storage. It will be cleared today." "You co-own a business, a garage in Reno, 6 years. It's stable. And your motorcycle club," she glanced at her papers, "Iron Vow MC. The name suggests a military connection." "All veterans," Ethan said. "Every member. We do 3 veterans fundraisers a year, 2 food drives, and we've transported medical supplies to rural Nevada communities 4 times in the last 2 years. Rex Dolan, our president, is in this room if you'd like to speak with him." Hannigan looked at Rex, who met her eyes without flinching, with the quiet steadiness of a man who has stood in harder rooms than this and held his ground. Then she said, "I'd like to speak with Lily." The room shifted. Pryor straightened slightly. Decker put his pen down. Ethan looked at Lily, who was already sitting up straighter, chin at that familiar angle, and he thought, "Jake, wherever you are, look at her." The judge leaned forward slightly, elbows on the bench, and addressed Lily directly, and without the sing-song oversimplification that children always see through immediately. "Lily, my name is Judge Hannigan. I want to ask you a few things, and I just want you to tell me what's true. Not what you think I want to hear. Just true. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am," Lily said. "Do you know this man?" She indicated Ethan. "I met him last night, but I knew about him before. My mama told me." "What did your mama tell you?" "She said Daddy had a brother, not a real one, but the kind that's more real because you choose it. She said if something happened to her, that man would take care of me. She said I could trust the eagle because my daddy trusted it." "You walked a long way to find him last night, 3 miles in the dark. Were you scared?" Lily thought about this. "Yes, but being scared isn't a reason not to do something. That's what Mama said." In the gallery, Rex Dolan put his fist against his mouth for a second and looked at the ceiling. "What do you want to happen?" Judge Hannigan asked. "Right now, if you could choose anything." Lily answered without hesitation and without drama, in the straightforward tone of someone stating something they have already thought through completely. "I want to go with Ethan, because he knew my daddy, and because he came when I found him, and he didn't walk away. And because he talked to lawyers and got here this morning, which means he's the kind of person who does what he says he's going to do." A slight pause. "And because when I had a bad dream last night, he woke up and told me I was okay without me even having to ask." The courtroom was very still. Judge Hannigan held Lily's gaze for a long moment. Then she leaned back. She looked at her papers. She looked at Pryor, who was maintaining his professional composure with visible effort. She looked at Ethan. "Mr. Pryor," she said, "the division's concern about established protocol is noted and is not without merit in the abstract. But I am looking at a specific child in a specific situation, which is what this court is designed to do." She folded her hands. "I am granting a 90-day emergency guardianship to Mr. Ethan Harlan with bi-weekly check-ins by a court-appointed family services liaison. At the end of 90 days, we reassess. Mr. Harlan, you will make yourself and the child available for all scheduled visits. You will enroll her in school within 2 weeks, and you will maintain employment. These are conditions, not suggestions." "Understood," Ethan said. His voice was steady. It cost him everything to keep it that way. "Mr. Pryor, you will have full access to the liaison's reports. If at any point those reports indicate a concern, we will reconvene immediately. She looked at him over her glasses. Is that satisfactory? Pryor took a breath. The division reserves the right to petition for reassessment if... I am aware of the division's rights, Mr. Pryor. I wrote several of the guidelines that govern them. She looked back at her papers. We're adjourned. The gavel came down. For a second, nobody moved. Then Lily turned to Ethan and said in a very small voice, Does that mean yes? Yeah, he said. He had to clear his throat to get it out. That means yes. She pressed her lips together hard. She was fighting it. He could see her fighting it the way she'd been fighting it since she walked into that bar, holding herself together through sheer Jake Mercer stubbornness. And then she stopped fighting it because she was 7 years old and she had just won something enormous. And she was absolutely allowed to stop fighting it. She leaned her forehead against Ethan's arm, right against the eagle, and she cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly and completely, with the total physical honesty of a child who has been strong for 3 days straight and has finally found somewhere safe enough to stop. Ethan put his arm around her. He held on. Rex Dolan stood behind them and looked at the wall and breathed. Decker gathered his papers with great deliberation and precision because his hands needed something to do. Dennis Pryor collected his file and walked out without speaking. But at the door, he stopped for just a moment. He didn't turn around. He just stood there, hand on the door frame for the space of one breath. Then he walked out. In the hallway afterward, Rex put one large hand on Ethan's shoulder and squeezed once, and said nothing, which was the most Rex thing he had ever done, and exactly right. And tush. Lily walked between them, holding the photograph against her chest and Ethan's hand on the other side, and when they pushed through the glass doors of the building and the morning sun hit all three of them, she looked up and squinted and said, Can we get breakfast? A real one, with eggs. Rex laughed, the real kind, loud and sudden and completely unguarded. Kid Ma, he said, you can have the biggest breakfast in Nevada. She considered this as a fair outcome, and they walked. The breakfast place Rex chose was a diner 2 blocks from the courthouse, the kind that has been in the same spot for 30 years and smells like butter and coffee and the specific comfort of things that don't change. They took a booth in the back, Lily on one side between Ethan and the window, Rex and Decker across, and when the waitress came, Lily ordered scrambled eggs and bacon and orange juice, and then after a pause toast with the systematic thoroughness of someone who had not eaten a real meal in several days and intended to correct that completely. The waitress wrote it all down without blinking. You got it, honey. Rex ordered the same thing. Ethan ordered coffee and didn't touch it. Decker checked his phone and then put it face down on the table in the deliberate way of a man deciding to be present. For a while, nobody said much. The food came and Lily ate with the same focused gratitude she'd brought to Hank's Burger the night before, and the men around her let her eat because sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is simply hold the space while they take care of themselves. Halfway through the eggs, Lily said without looking up, 90 days, and then they check again. That's right, Ethan said, and if they don't like what they see, they can take me back. They're not going to take you back. She looked up at him. How do you know? He met her eyes. Because in 90 days, they're going to see a girl who's in school and eating 3 meals and sleeping in a real bed. And they're going to see a man who shows up every day without exception. He said it without volume, without performance, just the flat, certain weight of a decision that has already been made and will not be revisited. That's how I know. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she went back to the eggs. Okay, she said. Rex watched this exchange over the rim of his coffee cup and said nothing. Decker picked his phone back up. I'll start the 90-day compliance file today. You'll want everything documented, school enrollment, medical, the room set up. Paper trail protects you. He looked at Ethan. And I'd recommend getting a family attorney retained for the long term. Not just me, someone who specializes in adoption proceedings. Is that where this goes? Ethan said. If you want it to, Decker said. Straight, no pressure behind it, just a question on the table. Ethan didn't answer right away. He thought about the word of adoption, the weight and the permanence of it, the way it moved from temporary to absolute, the way it transformed a promise made under desert stars into something a court would recognize, something that would exist in documents and records and the official story of a child's life. He thought about Jake, about what Jake would say if he could see this booth right now. Four people eating breakfast after winning a fight with his daughter sitting in the middle of it, eating toast with the systematic dedication of someone reclaiming something that was taken. He thought Jake would say, "It's about time, Harlan." "Yeah," Ethan said. "That's where this goes." Lily put her toast down. She had been listening. She always listened. "Adoption means you'd be my dad," she said. Not a question exactly, not quite a statement. Something in between, something being tested for soundness, the way you test a rope before trusting your weight to it. "It means I'd be your guardian, legally, permanently." He paused. "What it means to you is something you get to decide." She thought about this with the characteristic Mercer family gravity. Then she looked at the photograph, which was sitting on the table beside her plate, because she had taken it out of her waistband when they sat down and placed it carefully away from the potential splash zone of orange juice. She looked at her father's face for a long moment. "He'd think it was okay," she said finally. "I think he'd think it was okay." Rex set his coffee cup down on the table. He pressed his knuckle against his mouth for a second, looked away. "He'd think it was better than okay, Ethan said quietly. They left the diner at 10:15. Decker went back to his office. Rex walked with Ethan and Lily to the parking lot where the Harley sat, and he stood for a moment looking at it and then looking at the girl with the expression of a man doing practical mathematics. "She can't ride on that all the way to Reno," Rex said. "I know. My truck's here. I'll drive you both." "Someone can come back for the bike." Ethan started to say something. Rex cut him off. "Don't." Lily was already walking toward Rex's truck, with the pragmatic acceptance of someone who has stopped being surprised by the generosity of these particular men. She stopped at the passenger side and looked back at Ethan. "Can I sit in the middle?" "Yeah," he said. "You can sit in the middle." The drive to Reno took 3.5 hours, and somewhere around the 90-minute mark, Lily fell asleep against Ethan's arm. Not the half-asleep, restless way she'd been at Hank's, fully out, the deep, boneless sleep of a child who has finally completely let down her guard. Her head was against his bicep, right at the edge of the eagle tattoo, and her breathing was slow and even, and Rex drove with both hands on the wheel and the radio at a volume just above silence. After a while, Rex said quietly so as not to wake her, "You remember what you said to me the night we got back from the second deployment, at that bar in Killeen?" "I remember a lot of bad decisions at a bar in Killeen," Ethan said. You said the worst part wasn't the things that happened over there. You said the worst part was knowing there were people who were counting on you and not being sure you were the right man for it." Rex kept his eyes on the road. "You remember that?" "Yeah." "You were wrong then," Rex said, "and you're not wrong now." Ethan looked at the girl sleeping against his arm. At the photograph, she had even in sleep held onto her hand, wrapped loosely around it, trusting it to still be there when she woke up. "I have no idea what I'm doing," Ethan said. It came out quieter than he meant it, raw at the edges. "A bedroom full of storage boxes and a garage that takes up 60 hours a week, and I've never even kept a houseplant alive." "Houseplants are different," Rex said. "They can't tell you what they need. She can." He glanced at Ethan for just a second. "And she will. That kid has been telling people exactly what she needs since she walked into a bar and found you by the eagle on your arm. She's going to be fine. The question is whether you're going to let yourself believe it." Ethan looked out the window. The desert moved past in its vast and indifferent way. "She cried this morning," he said, "in the courtroom. I've seen combat. I've watched men I loved get loaded onto helicopters. I've held it together through things that—" He stopped, started again. "And a 7-year-old crying against my arm almost took me completely apart." Rex was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said, "that's how you know you're the right man." They reached Reno at 2 in the afternoon. The house was a 2-bedroom on a quiet street, not large, not small, just a house that a person lives in when they spend most of their time somewhere else and have not yet admitted that they want to spend it somewhere here. Rex pulled into the driveway and cut the engine, and the quiet woke Lily before anything else did. She lifted her head, looked at the house, looked at Ethan. "This is it. This is it." She studied the front of it with the careful appraisal of someone who has slept in enough different places to know that the outside and the inside don't always match. It looks okay, she said, which from Lily was a strong endorsement. Rex carried the bag that Decker had had someone retrieve from the Sunrise Motel Lily's things. What little there were of them packed into a canvas bag by the front desk attendant who had, according to Decker's contact, cried while she did it. There wasn't much. 2 changes of clothes, a worn stuffed rabbit with one ear shorter than the other, a library book, 2 weeks overdue, and a small notebook with a purple cover that had private written on the front in careful child handwriting. Lily saw the bag and went very still. Everything's there, Rex said gently. Every single thing. She reached out and took the bag from him, held it against her chest the same way she'd held the photograph, the same automatic gesture of protecting what was precious. Then she nodded and looked up at Rex. Thank you, she said, for today, for all of it. Rex crouched down again, bad knees and all. Your daddy would have done the same for any one of us, he said. That's the deal. That's always been the deal. She reached out and hugged him. One arm quick, the photograph still in the other hand, and then she stepped back and turned toward the house. The storage room took 2 hours. Rex stayed and helped, which meant it took 45 minutes. They moved boxes into the garage with the wordless efficiency of men who have moved things together before. And by 4 o'clock, the room was empty, except for the furniture that had been buried under the boxes, a bed frame, a dresser, a small desk in the corner that Ethan had forgotten was there. Lily supervised. She stood in the doorway and watched them work, and occasionally said things like, that box goes against the far wall, and don't stack those, they'll fall, with a quiet authority that neither man questioned. At one point, Rex looked at Ethan and mouthed, she's terrifying. Ethan agreed without making a sound. When the room was clear, Lily walked into it. She turned around once, slowly taking stock. She set the canvas bag on the bed frame. She put the photograph on the dresser, leaning it against the wall so it faced the room. She opened the notebook to the first page, considered something, closed it, and set it on the desk. Then she turned around and looked at them both and said, I'm going to need a blanket. Rex laughed. Ethan went to the linen closet and came back with the best blanket he had, which was not impressive, but was clean and adequately warm, and Lily accepted it with the dignified pragmatism of someone who has decided this will do. Rex left at 5 with a handshake for Ethan and a wave for Lily, who was sitting on the bed frame testing its sturdiness by bouncing slightly. He stopped at the door and turned back once, looked at the two of them. And what was on his face for just that second before he turned away and walked to his truck was not something that needed to be said or could be improved by saying it. After he left, the house got quiet in a different way. Not the charged quiet of the bar or the tense quiet of the courtroom or the holding its breath quiet of the diner. A different kind, the ordinary quiet of an evening in a house where two people are figuring out how to begin. Ethan ordered pizza because there was nothing in the refrigerator worth mentioning, and they ate it on the kitchen floor because there was one chair at the kitchen table and neither of them wanted to be the one sitting higher than the other. Lily ate 3 slices and then moved on to a 4th, with the steady momentum of someone who had apparently decided that today was the day to make up for lost calories. Somewhere in the middle of the pizza, Lily said, "What's going to happen to the motel room?" "The county handles it. Your mama's things will be kept safely." "She had a blue scarf," Lily said. "She wore it when she was cold. She said my daddy gave it to her before he deployed. She wore it a lot." She was looking at the pizza box. "I'd like to have it, if they find it." "I'll make sure they find it," Ethan said. "I'll call first thing tomorrow. It will not get lost, I promise." She looked up at him at the word promise, and something moved across her face, not suspicion, but something adjacent to the recognition of what that word meant coming from him in this context. Coming from the man who had driven 3 hours and cleared a room and stood in front of a judge and said, "I am keeping this." This word from this man meant a specific thing. She understood that. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." Later, he got a sheet from the closet and made up the bed while she brushed her teeth in the bathroom with the travel toothbrush Decker's assistant had thought to put in the canvas bag. When she came out, she climbed into the bed and pulled the blanket up and looked at him in the doorway. "Will you leave the hall light on?" she said. "Yeah. And you'll be here in the morning. I'll be here in the morning. I'll be here every morning. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached over and picked up the photograph from the dresser and held it in both hands, looking at her father's face. At the young soldier squinting into the sun with his thumb up, grinning the grin of a man who does not yet know how the story ends. I'm going to tell him, she said quietly. Ethan didn't ask what she meant. He knew. I'm going to tell him I found you, she said, and that you kept the promise, so he doesn't have to worry anymore. She said it with the perfect simple certainty of a child who has not yet been talked out of believing that love can cross the distances it needs to cross. He was probably worried. Yeah, Ethan said. His voice was not entirely steady. He probably was. She looked at the photograph a moment longer. Then she set it back on the dresser face up where it could see the room. She pulled the blanket to her chin. Good night, she said. Good night, Lily. He turned and started toward the door. Ethan. He stopped. I'm glad it was you, she said. That he picked. Out of everybody, I'm glad it was you. He stood into the doorway for a long moment with his back to her, and he held that sentence and he let it do what it needed to do to him, and then he breathed. Me too, he said. Get some sleep. He left the hall light on and went to the kitchen and stood at the counter and looked at nothing for a long time, and then he picked up his phone and opened his contacts and scrolled to a name he had kept there for 17 years without ever quite being able to delete it. Jake Mercer, followed by a number that no longer worked. Saved because some things you keep even when they serve no practical purpose, because you are not ready to let go of them, because a man is more than his phone number and a friend is more than a contact, and some connections do not require a working line. He held the phone in his hand. He didn't call. He just held it the way you hold something that matters, and he stood in that kitchen in the quiet of a house that had, as of today, become something it hadn't been that morning. A home? Home with someone in it who needed it to be one. And he thought about eagles. About how Jake had said that night in the tattoo parlor in Killeen, so we can always find each other no matter what. No matter what. Even across 17 years. Even through death and silence and every mile of distance a person can put between themselves and a promise they're not sure they can keep. Even then, the eagle had worked. Across time and loss and the impossible geography of grief it had worked. A dying woman had drawn it on notebook paper and tucked it into her daughter's memory, and that daughter had carried it 3 miles in the dark and pressed her hand against it in a bar at the edge of nowhere. And here they were. Here all three of them were, Ethan and Lily and Jake Mercer, present in every piece of the way a man can be present after he is gone if he loved the right people and trusted them to carry it forward. Ethan set the phone on the counter. He turned off the kitchen light. He walked down the hall to his own room, passing the open door of Lily's, and looked in. She was asleep. Deeply, completely, quietly asleep, the photograph on the dresser, watching over the room, the blanket pulled to her chin, the stuffed rabbit with the uneven ears tucked in the crook of her arm, because she had retrieved it from the canvas bag without comment while he wasn't looking, because a 7-year-old can be brave and practical and direct and still need her rabbit. Both things are true. He watched her sleep for just a moment. Then he went to his own room and sat on the edge of his bed and unlaced his boots the same way he had the night before in Hank's back room and set them on the floor. And for the first time in 17 years, Ethan Harlan did not feel the weight of something unfinished. He felt instead the quiet and complete solidity of a man who has found his way back to the only thing that ever truly mattered. Not because the road was easy, not because he was without fault, not because he had earned it cleanly, but because a little girl had walked 3 miles in the dark with a drawing in her shoe and found him by an eagle on his arm, and he had not walked away. A promise made under desert stars does not expire. It waits, it finds its way. And when it does, the only thing left to do is be the man it always believed you were.